Been making some raised panel cabinet doors in the workshop this week, all from MDF apart from a little bit of softwood beading around the corners here, and all held together with plenty of glue and some loose tenons. Turned out pretty nice. Now, if you haven't already seen my previous video on shaker style panel doors, it's probably worth pausing this video and going to take a look. There's a link on screen now and also in the description below, as I cover the marking out of a panel door in more detail there than I'm going to do in this video. Here I've cut 80mm wide strips of 22mm moisture resistant or MR MDF, and I'm trimming these to length to make the rails and stiles of this cabinet door. The panel is 18mm MR MDF, and I've already cut this to size. So with our elements ready to go, we can head across to the router table to fit our raised panel bit and make a few test cuts. Now, I don't use big bits like this very often, so the cutout in my bench isn't big enough for the panel bit to sit any lower, so we need to raise the base of the router bench with some 12mm MDF, which is simply screwed in place and also acts as a reference for the fence. Now, one thing I did want to address just quickly before we actually start cutting is we've got a big sort of panel raising bit here, big piece of metal to swing, and underneath the bench there's a honking great 1/2-inch router, very powerful. I have no qualms at all about making that cut in a single pass because I'm using moisture resistant MR MDF. It's a pretty soft material, it's a man-made board, it's pretty stable, it's not going to give me any problems. If you're using any kind of natural timber, you really need to be taking this in smaller nibbles, no more than sort of a 1/4 inch at a time. With this, I'm quite happy to do it in a single pass just because it's, you know, it's a soft material and it's a sharp cutter and it's a honking great router under there. That'll do the job nicely. With our fence and featherboard in place, we can make our first test cuts across two sides of the test piece and check them against the standard 9mm board I plan to use for the loose tenons. Perfect. But when I allow for the 15mm of panel that will be set into the groove of the rails and stiles, it's clear that there won't be enough space for our beading. As it stands, the bead would be sitting on the sloping part of our panel, which is no good at all. So, back at our router bench, we can release the fence and set it further back using a couple of 12mm offcuts as gauges before locking everything down again and, with the cutter untouched, making a second pass on our test piece. And this time around there's plenty of space on the flat of our panel for both the groove and the bead. With that settled and our fence back to the original position, we can make the first pass around the raised panel. Before resetting the fence and making our second pass around all four sides. Now we can replace our panel raising bit with a grooving bit, and although I do have a 9mm groover, its maximum depth of cut won't be enough for this door, so I'm using my standard 1/4 inch heavy duty groover, and we'll just have to make two passes. To set the depth of cut, I make a pencil mark on an offcut 15mm away from one edge, and simply hold this against the router fence, moving the whole thing back and forth until the cutter is aligned, then locking the fence down. Now with our completed panel face down, we can mark the required groove height onto a piece of 22mm scrap. Then transfer this to the router bench to set the height of the groover, making our first pass before adjusting the height of the bit, and then making a second pass before checking it for fit against our panel. Once we're happy, we can make the first grooving pass along the full length of the rails and stiles. Then, using our sled around both ends of the rails, before adjusting our cutter and completing the job by making our second pass. Lastly, we make a quick check for fit of the loose tenon stock before cutting to size the 4 loose tenons that we'll be needing for this door. So with all the components ready to go, I'm just going to do a quick dry fit here before we start gluing everything up. Now, when I make these doors, everything gets glued because I live and work in a country that has very little humidity change from one season to the next. If you live or work somewhere that has a greater disparity in humidity, probably a good idea not to glue the panel in. That's entirely up to you. You're adults, you can decide. But for me, I've made thousands of these doors, and this is going to get glued up. So the dry fit is all looking pretty sweet. Let's press on. So with all our components to hand, we can run a bead of glue into the groove of the stile before slotting home our panel. We do the same thing with the rails, making sure we get plenty of glue on the faces where the rails and stile meet. Before slotting home the remaining stile, and with plenty of glue on both sides, pushing home our loose tenons at both ends. Now it's a simple matter of clamping up the door and scraping away any excess glue. With the door still in its clamps while the glue is setting off, I'm going all old school and breaking out my Nobex manual miter saw to cut this very fine beading to size. Before gluing it all up and pinning it in place with a 21 gauge headless or veneer pinner. After that, a quick wipe down with a damp cloth removes the worst of the excess glue. And by now the door is dry enough to handle comfortably, so we can take it out of the clamps and trim off the loose tenon overhangs in the usual way. And finally, all we need is a quick minute with a sander just to clean up any glue squeeze and finish off everything nicely. Okay, well that's it for today. There you go, it's a simple raised panel cabinet door made entirely out of MDF, out of moisture resistant MDF, all glued together. Needs a little bit of paint, needs drilling for hinges, but otherwise it's a simple, cheap, easy way to make raised panel doors. Hope you found this useful, hope you liked it. If you did, give it a thumbs up, share it freely amongst your friends, and don't forget, do consider subscribing, then you'll be notified whenever I post something new. But that's it for today, thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care.